This is Why We Game. Today's guest is Jim Pinto. By the way, folks, I completely stole this from tabletopanalytics.com. For all your information about Kickstarter, they are not a sponsor, but Jim's a 20-year veteran of the gaming industry. He's written role-playing games, board games, card games, a novel, comic books, and even screenplays. He's won awards for writing, graphic design, art direction, and he's even won a dog show. So I'm going to assume that he is a fellow dog lover. He's a middle-aged man like myself who discovered gaming in 1980. Jim, how are you today?
I'm good. It's funny that you brought up the dog show. That's hilarious.
So I do my proper cyber stalking. I am a research department. I am also the editorial department. I'm the marketing department, etc. And I'm a full-time house husband. So when I pulled up Tabletop Analytics, I was like, this bio is great. I'm going to totally rip it off. And it talked about a dog show. So let's start there. What dog show did you win?
I didn't actually win a dog show. I hate to deflate anybody's fun there. I love dogs, and I was looking for something funny to write on my bio at the tail to say, look how diverse I am. I'm also a pet.
Okay. Fantastic. So what kind of dog or dogs pets do you have?
I don't have a dog at the moment because we just moved. I used to have a black lab, and I used to have a sheepdog. I like big dogs, but my wife and we adopted a dog for a short period of time here, and she kept biting me. She didn't like men. And so we had to take her back to the pound. It was a problem. She was always nervous around me, and I didn't think it was a healthy environment for her. But she was a smaller dog. I want to say, what the heck was she? She was some kind of mutt. She was a combination of pug and something else.
So you get little dog barking and you get breathing issues and all that along with temperament. Yeah, no thank you.
Yeah. And she loved me when we were in the car because she could sit on my lap while I drove, which apparently her previous owner had done with her. Mm-hmm. But when we got in the house, she got very protective of my wife, and she would bite me, and was explaining it either. It was just, I would walk into a room and she'd bite my knee or she'd bite my hand. And she didn't have sharp teeth or anything, so it wasn't a problem, but she was clearly not happy here. So that did not last.
Oh, that's sad. I have a dog now, but it's the first pet that I have had since I was a child, and he's a schnoodle. It's a schnauzer poodle mix. And he's the worst of both breeds because he's super intelligent, but he's also very, very prissy. He thinks that he is a 150-pound dog and not a 15-pound dog.
My Lord.
Yeah, he's a monster. But you've seen, obviously, the Dark Crystal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he looks like Fizzgig, the big thing who is more mouth than it is anything else. He's adorable.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, he melts my heart. I have a buddy that I've been gaming with for a long time, and he's like, I used to be intimidated by you, and then you got that fucking dog.
Yeah.
Any which way.
It's hard for you to be tough when you're walking that dog down the neighborhood and it's only 15 pounds and got this tiny little leash.
If I was single, though, I'm a cis-het white guy, right? If I was single, walking around town with that dog, I would be getting phone numbers, man. People.
I have to believe that's true. Yeah. Well, they want to hang out with him, though, not you.
No, it's true, but I'm charming, right? I mean, I just need my foot in the door is really what happens.
Costanza.
Well played. So among the various accolades and things that you have done in the gaming industry, I'm going to list a couple. Now, there are a couple things that you are going to be well known for. The toolbox from AEG was that third edition or 3.5 D&D?
That was 3.0. Okay. I think we did that one before 3.5.
And then Ultimate Toolbox, was that 3.0 also, or was that 3.5?
That was 3.5.
Okay.
But I don't think there's any stats in Ultimate, to be honest. I think it's just any kind of fantasy.
Yeah, I don't recall, to be honest. You've done work on L5R. You've done work for 7th Sea. You were the art director for Alderac Entertainment Group for several years.
Yes.
And
about 8, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And you wrote something that is well known in the industry to some people called The World's Largest Dungeon.
Yeah. Yeah, I managed it and I wrote about 75% of it. There were sections of it that didn't need to be fixed at all because the writers that did them were so great, but the majority of the book had to be rewritten.
Is that because you have so much experience in the industry? Because, I mean, we can get into your history, but for the listener, you heard that Jim is a 20-year veteran of the industry, and there's a lot of work to his credit. But the rewriting that you had to do, was that because you had the XP that others did not, or the work wasn't up to snuff? Column A, column B?
It's a little of both. A lot of it, I don't want to name names. If I name sections, it's going to out people who didn't pull their weight, right? But I will say this: when somebody had a volleyball scene going on in one of the rooms in the game, and I just thought, are you brain dead? What makes you think that this belongs in Dungeons and Dragons? This is the world's largest dungeon. We want to present each of these maps in this thematic way so they feel as old school and as new school as they can at the same time. I don't want anime ears in here. I don't want children. I don't want volleyball. I don't want people lounging on beds. This is not that kind of product. And so a lot of it had to be taken away from people, and I had to finish it.
I mean, obviously, I knew you couldn't do the entire project by yourself, but still, it had to be a tremendous undertaking just from a project management perspective, not just the writing and the game design, but just wrangling everyone, meeting deadlines, working with layout, working with editors. It must have taken years.
It took 11 months.
Shut up!
Which is
I'm calling bullshit on that. There's no way that happened.
It happened in 11 months.
It did not. How did you? What did you go to? Did you go to China and you were like, hey, we want to use the same factory Nike uses so we can get this module cranked out?
So what happened? It took me 11 months of writing, and we had a local printer turn it around really, really quickly because they wanted to do a book that big. They normally did a phone book, the company that printed it for us. So they wanted a hardback book in their repertoire, and I think we printed the whole thing in 6 weeks.
That is absolutely incredible. So who did the map then?
Chris Dorner. I drew the original map, just the lines, and then I handed that off to Chris Dornis, who did all the painting. But once I had the lines drawn for everything, I could hand that out to writers, and they didn't need colorful, pretty ones. They would just know where everything was in relation to one another. And it took me, I want to say 4 days to draw the whole thing in Photoshop. I just worked on the weekends. I came in on my own time and just cranked it out as fast as I could.
Okay. Jim, I don't mean to sound like a jerk, but in 11 months, how much play testing got done?
None whatsoever. It was just all intuition. I know. This is the first time anybody's asked me that. This is the first time I have to admit that it wasn't play tested. It was just all intuition. Does this feel right? Does this feel right? Does this feel right?
Oh, dude, that's how I game master. I mean,
yeah.
the CR, I don't care about what edition it is. The CR calculators are bullshit, right? Everything is done by feel. And I start every encounter with the gas is on the floor, because if I need to let off the gas, I can. If I need to pump the brakes, well, hopefully I'm a good enough driver that I anticipate traffic ahead of me, and I don't need to use those brakes too often, but they're there if I need them. But boy, it's much more difficult to build up momentum in ad challenge after the fact.
Right. And a lot of the encounters have, this is the way you make it more difficult, this is the way you make it easier. So that's baked right into the book. But there were things, I always go back to this one, room 90, C93. I don't care if that room is too powerful or not. I spent 3 hours writing that room to make it this really interesting prison that you're not supposed to open. And if you even get through the locks, if you're in there, whatever happens to you is your own damn fault at that point. So I wanted to, at times, write really interesting encounters without worrying about whether or not people are going to die in this situation.
I have mad respect for that. I ran an encounter. I'm running a 3.5 game currently in the midnight campaign setting. It's my
nice.
Yeah, my regular. You're familiar with it?
Yeah.
Holy shit. I love Midnight. It's clumsy, it's cumbersome. It obviously didn't get some playtesting in some pretty crucial areas. I adore it. Anyway, I ran an encounter recently, and at the end of it, my buddy was like, dude, that was amazing. He's like, you didn't give a shit that we could get killed, did you? I was like, I did not. And he's like, well, when you described the place and we did our recon and blah, 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 I really thought that you were just selling it up and that it was going to be, oh, it's not going to be that overwhelming. And when it was, I loved it. He was happy to have that threat on the table. I love it.
That's fantastic. I think the most memorable encounters you have when you're going back and thinking about the old days of your gaming, the ones that are most memorable are the ones where you barely survived or you did die, but it was it was this really close moment. I think these overkill encounters where the players are beating monsters without taking a single hit of damage, they're a waste of time.
I concur. And honestly, as a game master, the thing that I hate most about it, and let's just get right into it. In previous interviews, you have stated that, DMing is a job, particularly as time and editions have progressed. And for me, I have always felt that, regardless of what game I have played, I've always felt that the burden of effort was on the game master. But now also it is less rewarding because the players are so significantly powerful. They have so many tools in the toolbox. There are so few things that I can do to threaten and harm them that not only is it a job, it's not really a rewarding one any longer.
Yeah, I think fourth edition did something really bad for the hobby, which is the players are allowed to make a wish list of the magic items they want at the various levels because they will fit perfectly with their progression. And I think as soon as you do that, one, you've opened Pandora's box and you really can't close it again. But two, you cannot manage expectations anymore. If people are showing up with this entitled view of this is what my character wants and needs and I'm going to get it. I remember in first edition, you just got a random magic item off of a chart. It didn't matter if it fit your design idea or not. All of a sudden, you've got lightning hammers. Okay, but I'm a thief. What am I supposed to do with these? These are going to make a lot of noise. But you just have to adapt to the magic that you used to get. And now, and I think video games have a lot to do with this, is that you can point by your builds and be as efficient as possible with everything. You look at the tree ahead of time. These are the feats I'm going to take, and so on. That there's no mystery anymore. And when there's no mystery, the players are expecting certain things at certain points. They don't want to be challenged. I have a story about challenging players later if you want to talk about it. But overall, people come in with an expectation. And when that doesn't happen, you as the game master get blamed. If you do things to their expectation, well, then you did what you're supposed to do and you don't get any credit. But if you fail to meet their expectations, then you get blamed. Then that's why the reward is missing, to your first point.
No, I think you're spot on. Well, let's dive right into the challenging players anecdote.
So I recently ran Warlock, the Warlock with an exclamation point. It's an OSR game in the British style. I'm trying to remember the writer's name now. I cannot. But it's a very gritty, dirt poor. You play a toll keeper kind of character, and you work your way up into an adventure, but you're probably going to die because everybody's life is worthless. Right. And a player that had come from Pathfinder was playing this without realizing. I didn't realize that they didn't understand the old school vibe, so that's on me. And they didn't understand that this is nothing like Pathfinder and that there's going to be challenges in here and your character is going to get beat up. Now, I don't go out of my way to kill characters, so at no point did anyone's character die in the two times that I tried to run it. But I got a lecture on how bad of a game master I was, or rather advice. I'm being a little dramatic here, but rather advice on how to do it better. And I just thought, I've never in my life got notes back from somebody on how to game master. This is really weird and a little off-putting. And so I just stopped running Warlock altogether because it obviously was not meeting the player's expectations.
Did you continue to run games for that individual?
Well, this was online, and so that game came to an end anyway, and I started Vampire with different people. So I'm running Vampire right now.
Gotcha. And you're doing, I assume, based on my research department's snooping, that you're doing some sort of homebrew of Vampire?
I am. I'm doing that 6th edition thing that's on my website.
All right. And that is postworldgames.com, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because you've got an article up there that when I was, I should say, when my research department was doing the research, they read that article. And you and I talked a little bit about it prior to the recording. How is that game going?
It's only just gotten started. The die rolling is working really, really well. It's very clean. I've removed a lot of the extraneous nonsense that I don't like.
Do you mind just giving us some, giving us some highlights about here, 2 big changes that I made that were important to me?
Well, going to D6 instead of a D10, a unified target number. So everything needs a 5 or a 6 to work. And then when you roll a 2, 3, or 4, it fills some kind of battery on your character sheet. So you have these 3 extra stats called Curse, Hunger, and Willpower. Well, Willpower is already in the game, but I do it differently now. The Virtues and Vices are gone. So your Willpower builds up every time you roll double 4s. Every time you roll double 3s, your Hunger goes up, and every time you roll double 2s, your Curse goes up. And so when any of those gets to 6, they reset back to 0 and something bad happens. Or something, not Willpower, I'm sorry. When Curse or Hunger go up to 6, they reset to 0, and then something bad happens and you restart play, where you restart your counter for the purposes of tracking those pieces of data. So your hunger isn't tied to your blood going down to 0. It's a byproduct of you trying to do too much over the course of the game and it eventually biting you in the ass. Because no matter, every time you roll dice, you're running the risk of those stats going up. And so they don't become, okay, now your blood weakness is catching up with you. It's right now in this game. You know it's coming. You've got a 5 in blood curse. If you keep fucking around, you're going to get that 6 point pretty soon. So it's going to make you as a player think twice about just pushing yourself for no reason.
The idea of, and I am not a game designer at all, so I may mischaracterize something, but the idea of putting a regulator on the character's resource management of power. So, like you said, every time you pick up the dice, you're running the risk of tripping one of these switches. That's wild.
Yeah. It's I've designed a board game a few years ago. I tried to sell it to a company and it didn't go over, but I had built this sort of speed dial, if you want to call it that, or gauge, or valve into the game, so that when you got to 9 points, something bad happened to your cult and the cult that you're running. And so I just took that mechanic that I'd made in a game that never got published, and I just said I'm going to use it here. And I really like it because that's the kind of gaming I like to do, where there's a little bit of abstraction in your mechanics and your stats on the board or on the paper, but you still can manage it. You know when it's coming. So if you just want to slow down, you can slow down. I think it's the missing ingredient from Fiasco, to be honest.
All right,
Fiasco role-playing game.
You have preempted one of my questions because I know that you have written several play tests for Fiasco, but then you also have done a game that is GM-less, the Protocol game series. So one of the things that I was going to ask you, because I saw chronologically that your Fiasco stuff obviously was first, and so I thought, what was it that Fiasco didn't have that was one of the things that you wanted to do in Protocol? So let's start with what you were just saying about Fiasco.
So I was playing Fiasco, I think, as soon as it came out. I was with a playtest group in Pasadena, California, and we would play all these weird indie games that were coming out. And Fiasco came out, and I liked it when it first came out because I was playing with mature players, and we knew how to tell stories, and we got along, and we never turned it into how fast can I screw over somebody else's character. So we were using it in a different way than it was intended. And so when I was writing play sets for it, I was writing stuff that I thought was going to make really good stories. The first one I did was called The Dirt People, and it's about the 909 area code down in Southern California, and it has its own personality, its own kind of people. And I thought, this is the kind of white trash storytelling I like. Let me make a playset about that.
No,
and then I would go to cons.
I'm Midwestern white trash. That's our word. What? But no, when you said Dirt People, and I saw the bong on the cover, I was like, holy shit, he's getting interviewed by dirt people.
Yeah. And I grew up around dirt people, right? I grew up in poor neighborhoods in Southern California. So I was drinking down at the river when I was 13. So I totally get the culture, but I'm not in it anymore. I just sort of an outside observer now. And so I still enjoy stories, movies like Killing Them Softly, which I consider white trash cinema. I really love it because you see these people in desperate situations. And I wrote a protocol. We can get to that in a second also about white trash cinema. But there's actually something to appreciate and love about it, because you see, whenever we see movies about white people, they always live in big, giant, nice houses, right? And they're just having marriage problems. And boy, if they could just get on the same page, they could restart this marriage. And those stories are so trite and stupid. And most of us don't live in that world, that we have a swimming pool and 77 rooms in the house and guests over every weekend. Most of us live in double wide trailers. And so when you see these kind of movies where people are desperate, there's something that I can glom onto and appreciate about those stories. But what Fiasco does is it uses that pastiche, and then it just says, oh, you know what? Where they're coming from doesn't matter. They're all crazy and hooked on the chronic, and now they're going to go rob a liquor store and ruin everybody's lives in the process. And it's all a matter of time until they mess up everybody's fun at the table. And so I was watching Fiasco teaching people all these bad habits about how to play GM-less games. And I said, I don't want to be around that anymore. I don't want to be involved with that. I'm going to go make my own GM-less game that treats it like a script, that treats it like writing a story, and the tone changes from every game, but the structure stays the same because writing a script follows a certain kind of structure. And since I know how to do that and I know how to set tone, those protocol games, I think there's 70 of them now. They just kind of came out of me as I started doing more and more of them. And I realized what the system could do.
So, and I don't know if this is too big a question, but what's the core tension of, if I could steal the phrase from Justin Gary, what's the core tension of the protocol system?
The core tension is that you have a plot already built into the game, baked in. You don't have that in Fiasco. You have to sort of find it in your first two turns around the table. You have to find your plot. Each protocol has a built-in plot. It has these characters. You have a role, a motivation, a relationship with one another, and then you have world-building questions. And all of that stuff is baked in such a way that you already have either internal or external tension going on before you even direct that first scene. And then you're drawing poker cards that give you inspiration, that tell you the type of scene it is, which another thing that Fiasco was lacking was formality. There needed to be some more formalized logic as to who's in charge in a scene. And that always drove me nuts. So all of that is built right into protocol. So the flow of the game is just, okay, here's the scene, here's the people who are in it, go. And you know that the person who said that, who directed that scene, they're in charge. They navigate all of the conflicts, the pitfalls. If you need to know who's in the background, they can tell you, is it sunny out, that sort of thing. And that's all on director's shoulders. And then the players are given the setup, and we all naturally know how to tell a story. We may not believe that we can, but once you're in that moment and you're role playing, and the person you're role playing with, let's say your relationship is contentious but familial, right? Okay, well, these two people are cousins and they're arguing about the same shit they've been arguing about since they were 15, and this scene is going to finally bring it to a head. And maybe they're going to punch each other out. Who knows? But they're in charge of how they resolve these tensions. I think unlike maybe, say, Fiasco, which is all about just letting things build up and build up and build up until the second half of the game when people start really screwing each other.
How much overlap is there for you as a game designer? Let me try to put some context to this. gaming has evolved. We have seen, as lame as the word is, we've seen the gaming zeitgeist shift over time. And we've gone from wanting these really crunchy, heavy, mechanical, chart-driven games to a different kind of crunch to now a more open, a more narrative, and in some cases, GM-less style gaming. You obviously have a foot planted firmly in each camp. How do you do that?
I think it's because I love so many kinds of games. I think with the exception of first-person shooters, I like lots of different kinds of video games. And I think the same is true of board gaming and card gaming. I grew up playing canasta and euchre. I think that's how you pronounce it, euchre or euchre. I grew up playing these with adults when I was just a little kid. And so I fell in love with games at a very young age. And I think you can't, I'm going to badmouth FOSSA for just a second. FOSSA made a Battletech and they made Shadowrun back in the day. And I think they're defunct now, but Catalyst owns all that stuff now.
So FOSSA is still around because they're still doing a lot of Earth Dawn 4th edition stuff.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. FOSSA used to just make games that were just numbers and just number crunching, and there was really no soul to what they were doing. And I'm not trying to attack them. There were people that liked the spreadsheeting aspect of those games. I think that when you're only making a game that does only that kind of thing, you're only going to attract a certain kind of gamer. And I want a game that is going to make that compromise in the middle for all kinds of gamers, so that even if you like a lot of numbers, you have that opportunity for that in some of the things that I make. But for too long, we weren't really making games for people that just wanted to sit down and talk. And I'll be the first to admit that Protocol is almost a Saturday afternoon activity or a rainy day activity more than a game. But it is the drama points and the narrative control that root it as firmly as it can in the camp of gaming. There's a lot of games like Quiet Year that I don't believe are actually technically games. And there's little fixes you can do to it to make it a game. But I think it is just a conversation piece. Microscope is a conversation piece. They're fine conversation pieces. There's nothing wrong with them. I enjoy playing them, but they don't have enough anchors in the ground to gaming to say, well, this is a game. Sorry, to answer your question, I need something to have all of these different components to call it a game. And so that's why I like to keep my feet in all the realms of design as possible.
Is there one that you spend more time doing? Like, if I had to guess, I would place my money on you spend a lot of time doing writing in some sort of script structure more than you do game design, but I could be wrong.
Lately, I really stopped writing Protocol and Praxis games a few years ago. I have some Praxis games I need to release. I've got about 10 in the hopper, but I just haven't released them yet. But I've really gotten back into games with stats, games where that would feel traditional, but where the players have different kind of agency than they're used to. Instead of coming with expectations and with rules and lists of magic items, instead they're able to say, the bartender is named this, and I know him from here, and he owes me a favor. And they're able to say that at the beginning of play, that they have this relationship with somebody. And now the game master, instead of having to script out 10 encounters to get to that +1 sword, now they just have to deal with the fact that there's a bartender named this, and this is their personality. In these games, the players are adding to the canon, but they're not adding to the canon in a way that makes it work for the game master. So that's really where I am right now with my designs.
You have done not just gaming writing. I mean, there are comic books, a novel, screenplays to your credit. How long have you been doing just writing professionally?
I wrote my first comic, I want to say back in 2003 was the first time I stepped outside of gaming to write. I mean, I'd written poetry before, but I never got paid for that. I think it's impossible to get paid for poetry. And I wrote some short stories in college for the book they put out every year. But it wasn't until about 2003 that I started breaking out of gaming writing. And then I wrote my first script in, I want to say 2010. 2008 maybe. And then in 2012, we won an award. My writing partner and I, Travis, we won an award for our second screenplay. I wasn't even in the country. We won the award. That was so funny.
Really?
But yeah. He had sent me a text. I was on the streets of Lisbon, Portugal, partying with some people. And I get this text that said, we won CineQuest 2012. I said, oh my God. I don't even know what to say to that. And nobody there even knew that I was writing screenplays. So I have to share all this news with these strangers. Well, but first, I'm a screenwriter. And second, we just won an award. Who? What? So yeah, I guess I've always wanted to try to do all the other stuff. I never even had the confidence with myself as a game writer to think that I could do that. So branching out was it took a lot of cajoling to get there.
Yeah, but
internal cajoling.
You're too productive to have imposter syndrome.
I don't think I have imposter syndrome necessarily, but I still lack confidence. I think when I turn to people for feedback and advice, I don't get really what I'm looking for. In fact, I was just on Zoom yesterday helping this Norwegian woman with her book of poetry, and I went through the book with her, and I was giving her concrete, real advice, and she was loving it. Right, that's what she needed to make her book better, so on and so forth. Sort of consulting with her on the project, and I said, "Yeah, this is the kind of advice I wish people would give me when they're reading my stuff. Instead, they just tell me what the typos are, and anybody can tell me where the typos are. I need you to help me with structure. I need you to tell me this is a dumb idea. I need you to tell me this is in the wrong place." But I don't get that kind of feedback. So that's one of the things that kind of hurts and stops me from getting better, is that I don't have that network of people tearing me apart.
Yeah, where does one find good editing? I mean, obviously that's a silly question to ask you because you just told me you don't know where, but is there a support group or there are subreddits? I mean, where do you find somebody? Because if I was doing gaming work, I would not know. If I was trying to become a freelancer, I would have no idea how to get my work edited.
Yeah, well, I mean, guys like me are great, a great resource for that, because I do know the people, right? If you could afford him, if you could afford James Lauder, if you could afford Adam Dre, I would point you to guys like that. And I'd say, those guys are good editors. They're good writers. They know what they're doing. They can help you. But I'm not in that position that I can afford their rates all the time. And I'm cranking out so much stuff that if I had to pay somebody to edit every little PDF I did, I'd be, well, I'm already broke, but I would be less than broke.
So let me ask you that, are you doing gaming work full time as your career?
Yeah. And I really need to stop doing that. I really need to get just a regular job, 4 hours a day somewhere. Just one, to get out of the house, and two, to put some, coffee money in my pocket.
How much of that is generated through your work on Drive-Thru RPG? How much of your income?
Drive-Thru does not generate that much. It's almost all Kickstarters where I make my money. I will, if I say, let's say I sell 300, 400 copies of something, that'll be 80%, 90% of my sales overall for that book. And I think a lot of people suffer that. I think a lot of people suffer that too right now, because there's such a glut and it's hard to get any kind of attention. I know Alan Barr is much better at marketing than I am. And so he's seeing a lot of returns on Drive-Thru that I'm not. We did a test. Nobody knows this. I can tell you something nobody knows. So we did a test. I have a game called The Death of Ulfstadter. And over the 5 years that it had been out, I hadn't sold any of it on Drive-Thru. The only sales I had done were through the Kickstarter for it. So I changed the writer's name to his, and I gave it to him. I gave him a new PDF. I said, put this on your store. I want to see how well it does. And it sold 25 copies in the first week because it was on his store and I'm not on mine. So it was the telling experiment. It was totally worth it, right? It was a game that wasn't moving for me anyway. But it was a telling experiment about what's going on in the hobby, about just getting eyes on you is so much work. And guys that are doing it right are seeing sales, regardless of whether or not anybody knew that game was going to be any good, right? They saw Alan's name on it. They saw it was on his store and they bought it. To this day, I still don't know if anybody has played it from his sale, but that was a telling moment, and it told me, okay, well, if I'm going to continue to do things the way that I'm doing them through Kickstarter, I just have to be happy with these results and just make the games that I'm making the way I'm making them, instead of trying to chase after that dragon.
And you've done a lot of Kickstarters. Have they been all RPG projects, or have you kickstarted any board games? Because I know that you've designed several board games as well.
I didn't kickstart them myself, but I built the Kickstarter pages for people who kickstarted them. So my game Dice Crawl, for instance, that was essentially run by me, but not really run by me. That one was run by Alyssa. And then I did Gondola for this other guy at, what's the name of it? Big Kid Games or something like that. I think he sold 500 through Kickstarter or whatever the number was. But so I don't know if those count as me doing Kickstarters for board games. I've never done one through Post World Games. I did do a book of poetry through Post World Games on Kickstarter, but otherwise, yeah, no. My page has only been role-playing games.
And how many Kickstarters have you done now?
22.
Let me ask you then, if an individual, the listener, me, whomever, if someone was looking for a good source for advice on Kickstarter, where would you point them?
Well, generally, I say come and talk to me because I made so many mistakes early on. I can tell you what they were and how to avoid them. I just helped a guy who wants to do minis on there, and we talked for about an hour on Skype, and we just went through. I said, well, here's all the things you need to know. This is what you need to know about shipping. Here's how you need to plan this. So generally I tell people to turn to me. I don't know if there's any books out there. I learned everything through trial and error. So I wouldn't even know where to start. I think maybe Kickstarter has their own advice page, but I don't know if that advice page applies to gaming so much, just generic projects. And I think gaming is a unique enough hobby or niche that the advice needs to be a little different.
I think you're right there. I have these fantasies that someday someone in the gaming industry will put this manual together. And someday someone in the gaming industry will say, hey, here's how you do 3 or 5 act structure writing for a role-playing game, right? Oh, and here is a book about managing people. Everything I learned from managing personnel when I was working in an industry and how I apply it to game mastering.
I would happily write the how to do a Kickstarter book, but I don't know how to market one. So somebody else would have to come in and write that chapter that has run really successful Kickstarters, you know?
Right.
There's a lot of people that come in and do these 5E projects and $250,000 on day one.
Yeah, that or, the people at CMON.
Yeah. They've mastered it, right? They turned it into it's an assembly line the way they do those Kickstarters.
Yeah. And God bless them. I mean, why are you guys in retail stores anymore? Like, why don't you just cater to your own cult? And yeah, I'm happy they are because I am not one of the devoted. And so I still buy my Cool Mini or Not stuff at the game store. But, it's a weird time in the industry with Kickstarter and conventions and 3-tier distribution and there's so many darn options. I don't know what the future looks like in 10 years,
Yeah. Well, I think it was Hero Games. They were the first ones to say, we're not going to go through the distribution system anymore. It's just a headache for us and we're not making enough money. And so they started selling direct. And so while they saw a reduction in sales numbers, they saw an increase in profit because they were making more off of each book. And I remember in the early 90s, I was working at a game store in Pomona, and you get a sense that they really did at that time I only play FOSSA products. I only play Palladium products. I only play products from Mayfair or whatever the company was, that these direct news flyers and newsletters would go out and people would just stick to their products. Steve Jackson Games was definitely one of those companies where if you played Steve Jackson Games products, you played them all. Yeah, and we may be coming back to that. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was it's a lifestyle thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, God bless them. I love miniatures, and I've got a number of battle foam cases. But the battle foam thing, I mean, it's brilliant because it's like apparel more than it is top quality protection for my miniatures. But because it's kick-ass top quality protection for my miniatures, but there's something that is battle foam chic about having it.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I don't know how to market that way, and I'm not that kind of person, but I get that people do get into the lifestyle purchases. I think it's the same thing with Instagram influencers, right? They're telling you, buy this lip gloss, buy this brand of jeans, whatever. And people just, they get into that, what do you want to call it? I guess that niche again. And they just stick there because they feel comfortable.
Looking at the number of successfully funded Kickstarters that you have, I would imagine that there is at least a small group of devoted individuals who are ready to consider anything that you're posting.
There's about 6 of them. Yeah, I think there's 6 guys that I can always count on if I launch something.
I'll tell you this, the same thing that I tell people about my show, and they're like, well, we're going to talk to all 6 of your listeners. And I'm like, I, sir, have hundreds of listeners. Hundreds. And so, no, it's actually funny. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but just as a matter of scope, you, who are my interview today, and Alex Kammer, who I interviewed earlier this week, are so far the 2 biggest people that I have had on my show in terms of careers, because you being the art director for a major board game company in the industry, that's a big deal relative to what other people on my guest list have done. So I think let's go to transition into that, because I think that art direction is something that people probably don't understand. And I think that art is something that people take for granted in the hobby industry in terms of how important it is, not just for selling a book or for creating a vibe or a tone to go with the material inside, but just how important it is for breaking up a book and layout.
Right.
So what did your job as art director, again, I know we don't have 3 days for you to break down what your job responsibilities were, but in the elevator pitch, what did you do as art director for Alderac Entertainment Group?
So I was in charge of all the art for all the games. I was the only art director / art manager.
You mean all the role-playing games and all the CCGs?
Yeah.
And all the board games.
Yeah, well, I left before the board game era, but I did the art direction on Dominari and Mercante. That whole Tempest, those Tempest board games, that was all art that I was in charge of and doing the look. But before that, up until 2005, I was doing all those CCGs and all the role playing games.
Well, CCGs alone had to be just L5R. I'm assuming that it was under the AEG moniker at that time, or no?
Yeah. Okay. There was a time when I was doing 4 CCGs at once. I think at the most work I ever had was 12 different products. It was 8 different art role-playing game lines and the 4 different CCGs. But we didn't have that many CCGs for very long. Doomtown eventually got dropped. 7th Sea eventually got dropped. And then I didn't have to do any art direction on Initial D. So I can say that I didn't work on that, but I did work on the Spycraft CCG. And that was just one team in the Philippines called Octic Graphics. They were doing the art for that. So that made that a little easier. But Doomtown, 7th Sea, and L5R, when all of them were going at the same time, that was a lot of work. That was certainly a lot of work.
I can't even imagine, because you've got 200 plus or minus cards per set, each with individual art, all of the layout work that has to go on with fitting them properly onto the cards for the right colors and right. Sounds like hell.
I actually loved it, to be honest. Okay. I found a way to streamline it. When I came in, I didn't know what I was doing. So let me start there. When I first came in, the first thing I worked on was Doomtown and the Brave New World role-playing game. Those were the very first things that needed art, because we had taken over Brave New World from Shane Hensley's company. I'm drawing a blank on the name. Pinnacle.
Yeah.
Pinnacle had originally published it, and then as part of some deal, we took it over and we started doing the source book. And so I ordered all the art for that, and I ordered all the art for the Doomtown CCG because we were getting that from what's that company? Five Rings Publishing. They were this intermediary company that existed between Asshat, and I say Asshat. I don't say the name you said. I just have a lot of bad memories of the place. Between WotC and Asshat, there was a company called Five Rings. They were the ones that were sort of the intermediary for a while, and they ran those games for a while, and then we either overloaded or weren't doing a good job. I don't know the details there. We got those back, and we got Doomtown back, and we had to start doing it in house. And so I was ordering art for that, and I had to find, I think, 175 pieces of art, and I had no artists in my repertoire. So I'm just calling everybody. This is the age of phones. And I'm just calling everybody I can find, any portfolio I can find that was at the company. And then when I was on the phone with an artist, I say, do you know anybody that's looking to do work? And so that first set, it was bale wire that I put it together with, but I learned a lot. I learned how to communicate with artists. I learned about composition, about color. I started asking questions. And over the years, I just got better and better at it. And then I got really efficient at it because I would learn to write just the loosest art descriptions for things. I only wrote very specific things when it had to be very specific. So if I'm ordering a samurai for the Crab Clan and this character has never existed before, then I can say, give me a badass looking crab samurai carrying a tetsubo. And then I leave all of the fun in the hands of the artist. And we started getting amazing work doing it that way. Once I took the constraints off and I took the writing process out of the writer's hands and I just did the art descriptions myself, I was cutting out a week from the amount of time it took to get this stuff done. And so that gave artists more time to work. And then I learned how to build deadlines better, and work would come in and I would color correct it in time if I could, and then shift it off to graphic design. Anyway, I'm going on too long.
No. I was saying I must assume that the artists were receptive to less restriction.
Yeah, absolutely. They were telling me stories about what Magic the Gathering was doing to them. I won't drop any names, but at one point somebody said, yeah, the only thing I get to come up with is the composition. All these characters are already defined for me. The colors are already chosen. All I get to do is compose the piece.
Yeah.
And so even though we were paying, I think 10% of what they were paying, people were having fun working for me because it wasn't work. It was just easier.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
If people are happy and they feel respected, they're just more productive and easier to work with. It's crazy.
Yeah, I get your sarcasm.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I was trying to do too is I was trying to build a stable of artists who all looked tonally the same so that the games looked consistent. And then what I was doing is I was finding that, well, there's some of these guys are just they're over the top good. They're going to be leaving us soon. They're not going to be here forever. And I had a lot of young people coming in who hadn't done this kind of work before. And so I was building, this is in the day of Yahoo, I built a Yahoo group where we could get in there and talk all of the inexperienced people or the people that were struggling with what it is that we needed. And we could talk about those things. And that's the kind of things art directors weren't doing with freelancers. If they didn't like the work they were doing, they were just firing them. But I was trying to do everything I could to massage these people into better artists so that they would in turn stay with us longer. I treated it like WWE, right? Bookers promoting guys from the bottom into the mid-card level and trying to make them better wrestlers. But go ahead.
It's management 101. If your employee sucks, it's your fault.
Right.
Oh, that's so infuriating. Like, well, you blow, get out of here. I'm like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What am I doing wrong? How do I improve? I mean, I fought so hard to get this job. May I have some opportunity to keep it, please?
Right. And I would send back really detailed long notes for people who were having problems, right? I can't remember any names off the top of my head, but we had a guy that was just painting the same faces on everybody. Ooh. And I said, okay, this is starting to look stale. You need to mix this up. Some of these people are grinning too much. This is a grim game about samurai. I don't want to see any teeth. I don't want to see these guys happy. That's not what this game is about. You can put teeth on a pirate, for 7th Sea, that's a jovial game. But no, I don't want to see anybody smiling in L5R. And so giving that kind of feedback and saying, okay, well, your blending isn't good here. Your backgrounds look like photographs. This isn't working. You need to mix this up. And sometimes it didn't happen a lot, but sometimes I would have to send work back or just cancel it and say, this doesn't fit the game. This clearly does not fit the game. And I hated doing it, but at the same time, I said, if you want to continue working, if you want to get more assignments, you have to look like the style guide. And the nice thing about L5R is we had this 40-page style guide full of examples and colors and telling you, this is the PMS color for the crab blue. Here's the PMS color for the crane blue. Because that style guide existed, there was a lot of reference, as opposed to, say, Warlord, which I only had $2,000 to build that style guide. And it was just some bad sketches from people's sketchbooks because we couldn't afford anything else.
It's interesting that you say that, because I always thought, particularly like on the big starter box thing, that the art did look sketchy.
On Warlord?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a huge story there. I don't know if you want to hear it.
Yeah, of course I do. I mean, that's just, again, as we talked about prior to recording, this is why I do this show, is that this is my indulgence and it just builds audience. I hope they want to hear it because I do.
Yeah. So this is a dirty secret. The company was about to go under. We were 18 months behind on a lot of bills on paying artists. William O'Connor was owed over $10,000 at that point. And we had to do Warlord, and I had to ask and beg for all these favors from people and say, look, you will get paid after this. I promise this is the thing that we need to revitalize cash and the company. Please don't tell anybody. And a lot of people said no, they didn't want to do it. But I got people to do, Drew Baker, he's a good friend of mine. He did a lot of work on it. And that's when I first met Storm Cook. He called me out of the blue, and Jeremy Jarvis, these people that didn't know we were having problems, that were talented. Mm-hmm. So they took on some work, and then we did not pay people as fast as we said we were. So the next set, called Assassin Strike, had even worse art than the first Warlord set. And all of that was because we were out of money.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if I'm asking too much or you don't want to answer the question, I get it. But how did that situation occur? How did, what did you call him? Asshat?
Asshat, yeah.
Yeah. How did Asshat get in that situation?
So we had two people at the helm of the company. The owner was going through his bullshit, his personal drama. And I don't like him. He and I have had our words in the past. I'm not going to cast aspersions on him. He is who he is. But he hired the wrong people. And there were these three people sort of at the top. One of them was just deadweight, Mark Jelfo. The other two were Maureen and Mary. Mary was my direct supervisor, and the other one was Maureen. Maureen really knew how to run the company. She really did. She had an affinity for it, and she was just a ball buster, and she got things done. Mary didn't even know what the fuck we were doing. She had no concept of what games were. She didn't know that our work was mostly creative and not administrative. And they had turned our jobs into, I had to start filling out a time card. I had to fill out a time card, and the marketing team didn't. That should tell you everything wrong with the company.
I get it. Yep. It's somebody who had been poisoned by some corporate background, came in and started applying rules to something that they did not understand.
Yeah. And so the company didn't even try to cost how much everybody else in the company was costing, only the 8 creative people that were left. So you had 40 people working at the company, 8 of which who are making product. So these other people are just a liability in their cost, but they're not on the cost sheet. They're just listed as 5% overhead. And that was incorrect math. And I can just tell you right there, time cards and the incorrect 5% overhead math are the two elements that brought the company down, because on paper, they kept thinking, oh, we're making profitable books. But then when you go and you look at the double ledger in accounting, we're losing hemorrhaging money every month. When I left, the company fell, I want to say 3 months later, and they didn't fall, but they had their Black Wednesday. They fired everybody with 6 people, and they were $500,000 in debt, and the owner didn't even know it.
Whew.
So you had these 2 people running the company like a corporation, like we sold insurance, when in actuality, we're a bale and wire gaming operation because we're down to 8 creative people who are doing work, and the rest are. They would have a manager meeting once a month in this big meeting room, and it was over half the company was in there. How is over half the company managers? How is that possible when your company is, selling, if they're lucky, 50,000 units of a CCG a month? Not a month, a year.
That's insane.
Yeah. Nobody there is going to be happy that I said any of this. And I'm just telling you right now, I don't give a fuck. It's been too long. And I've told them for years as we were careening down that hill, I kept saying, you've got me filling out a time card and nobody else. This doesn't make any sense.
Is it because creative is just inherently more expensive per hour?
No. I was salary. It didn't make any sense for me to fill out a time card.
Oh,
I didn't make.
Wow. Okay. I thought they were just kind of cracking down because the artists are getting paid X per hour or what have you, and everyone's heard about it.
No. We didn't even have artists in the company in stores anymore. We had 2 before, but they were eventually gotten rid of because the company saw, it's more expensive to have them than it is to hire a freelance. So They slowly got rid of those people. We had 3 writers left at the end, myself, Rob, and Pat. And so we were having to constantly hire freelancers to fill in gaps. I was putting out a book every 2 months for the D20 line on top of doing the art direction, on top of hiring artists. And so all this work was falling on us. And then you go over to the marketing side and you see they're spending a salary a week on postage, shipping out flyers. And how about you don't do that one week and give me the money just so I can pay my rent? Because this is ridiculous, the amount of money that you guys are spending. And they're not aware of anything because left hand, right hand sort of situation. It was just bad. It was just bad all around. And so I left and I actually came back later because I really liked designing, and I still, despite all the hard feelings, I wanted to move on, and all the bad habits just started again.
Oh, sure.
Even without Mary and Maureen there.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah.
You're extremely dialed in, at least on your experience with Asshat. Are you dialed into other parts of the industry? Because I want to ask you your opinion on a couple of things that are happening in the industry, if you don't mind.
I don't keep up on everything anymore. There's just too much drama, and I just want to make games. But I can give you my best educated guess on some things and tell you what exactly is happening at other places.
So for example, something that I do not understand because I have never been part of a union is how unionization, how it's being presented in the gaming industry and how it's going to ultimately, or how it is currently impacting the gaming industry. And that's something that I'm not versed on at all, other than what I read or see online, which that doesn't really tell me a whole lot.
So I will say this. I know that everybody at Paizo and WotC are paid pretty well, more than the median income for the county. They're both up here in King County. I'm in Seattle. And so I know that they're all paid very well. And I know that when I was coming up, freelance was 2 cents a word. And now some places are paying 10, 15, 20 cents a word, which is astronomical to me, right? I would make more money if I could get regular freelance work than if I was self-published right now, which is just a crazy place to be. I do not know what the sales numbers are that are helping to justify those increased rates in writing. A lot of people are saying it's still not enough. This unionization thing that's starting to happen, I think it's more about work conditions. And there's just a lot of bad managers in this hobby. I mean, gamers are inherently not good at talking to people. And I think when they get into positions of power, they turn into real pricks. And so when I hear about unionization, I think it's about work standards rather than money. I don't think you're going to fix it by unionizing. I think you're going to fix it by just everybody saying, I've had enough. That's really when it changes. That's the only way I saw any change at Asshat was when, okay, hey, nobody's here anymore. We lost all of our graphic designers.
If I may, let me stick with the business theme. You talked a lot about, while you were there at Asshat, what struck me as corporate poison and things that I see with my friends and family that work for these big corporations. Because I've only ever worked for small mom and pop shops and mostly gaming stores, with the exception of one corporate gig, and it was hell. And the stuff that I saw there are the things that I see for my friends that work for all these other large corporations. And there's just some insane things that occur. And I worry about big business. Now, with that said, and I don't want to get into a political thing, I love money. I want the industry to make money. I want people to have money. I want people to have great cars and nice places to live and full bellies of good food. I want them to have those things. But business sometimes gets in the way of art. And sometimes I feel like that the business side of things fucks up the gaming industry. And that's why I am concerned when big companies like Asmodee come in and start buying up everything, not because they're trying to make money or because they're trying to make the industry better, but because they want to make their company look more valuable by assimilating market share. I don't think that the size of the industry is going to get any smaller, but I'm scared to see what big companies are going to do when they really start taking notice of things like WotC.
Right. No, yeah, that's actually a real fear. I've gone on record as saying there's a lot of elements in the hobby that are here because it's profitable, and they're not here because they love gaming. There's a lot of dude bros in the gaming industry now, and they come with this expectant mentality, and I deserve this, and I'm going to take my $100,000 a year out of the company first before I worry about anybody else being taken care of, or whatever the number is. Right? You got guys that are taking. You've got some guys in the industry that were making a good $250,000 a year, and they were absolute dead weight. In fact, they were fired as soon as Hasbro bought WotC. And that's easily researchable. You know who I'm talking about if you go look it up. But my big fear is not that there's companies that are going to eye the hobby and take it over. My fear is the other side, when the hobby starts going back into another recession, because it does ebb and flow, right? People get sick of it, or they just age out of the hobby, or they're just tired of the same old. The hobby's going to go through that recession again. And when that happens, these companies, WotC's going to sell off D&D at some point, right? They're going to say, this isn't making us money anymore. 6th edition flop, let's get rid of it. And the person that picks it up isn't going to have the weight to make that game great again. And so the big fear for me always is that these companies come in and they do more harm than good because they leave so quickly. In Star Wars role-playing game by West End Games went away because the owners of West End Games was an Italian shoe company. And that Italian shoe company had to raid the coffers because their sales were waning. And so West End Games version of Star Wars is gone because of a shoe company. That makes no sense. That makes no sense at all.
That's fantastic. Now, I looked over at my shelf because I have a copy of the 30th anniversary reprint on a shelf over there that I was just eyeballing, because when that came out, I didn't have a copy as a kid. And when it came out, I was like, I'm getting one of those. Because I was like, Italian shoe company, be damned. I'm getting me a copy. Let's talk about game mastering and just getting into running games. I alluded to earlier that someone should do a book about management and game mastering, and where those two, where the circles of those two, that Venn diagram where they overlap. And one of the things that I always wanted to get into, and you made me think about this during a different interview you had done, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically you were talking about polished, rehearsed voice actors and actresses are doing gaming a disservice because they're setting an unrealistic expectation about what gaming is going to be. Now, me being me, I immediately took it to a level of crassness and said, oh my God, it's like pornography. Like I'm watching all of this, right, but it's not fucking real. It's like watching people have sex in a movie. It's not real. First of all, no one leaves their bra on. And that's asinine. But second, it's not like that at all. I was like, Jesus Christ, that's true. And yet it makes me think about what you said about the people in the industry that are more concerned about the money than the hobby. And well, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And I don't want to disparage because they're selling more players' handbooks than I am, but it's not gaming. It's not what we do.
Right. I've always separated the difference between a game and a product. And I don't look at D&D as a game anymore. It used to be a really good toolbox. As poorly written as first edition was, and there's so many problems with it, so many parts of that book is a toolbox. Those great charts, some of the advice, the play example. I love the play example in the DM's Guide first edition. Oh my God, it opened my eyes to what you could do as a game master. And those kind of tools are gone. Now it's all vague bullshit about, oh, you don't want to railroad your players, yada, yada, yada. And yet we're going to put out 10 modules right after this that railroad the players.
Yeah. You know what?
So why are you giving me this advice?
I'm pro railroad. I'm done with sandboxes. I'm done.
Right.
I'm just, you know what? I used to complain about my players who would show up to the game. It would be like a roller coaster, right? They know that the danger's not real, right? It's not very likely that the tracks are going to get stopped and I'm going to be frozen for 3 hours inverted. Very unlikely to be thrown from the machine and actually die. I'm going to go up. I'm going to go down. I'm going to have my fun. I'm going to walk away. And I used to bitch about those people for their lack of participation and imagination. But I'm at a point now where I'm like, you know what? Have a seat, kids, because I'm tired of dealing with people's bullshit. I'm tired of off the rails. I'm tired of, it's pretty obvious that the adventure is that direction. I'm happy to indulge you, but eventually I would like for you to go after the adventure. That'd be pretty cool.
I'm an exact different kind of game master, but I understand where you're coming from. I get it, because if you have those kinds of players. I was at a play test with Brian Bird. There were 6 of us at the table, and he said, I want audience participation. I want you involved. And he went on this very long explanation of what he was looking for to play test this game he was designing. And 3 of us got into it. We were doing our thing, and the other 3 just did what people do at conventions. They just sit there and wait till they're to be told to roll dice. And I got to tell you, those aren't the kind of guys I want to play with. If they're at a convention table of mine, I know how to deal with them. But that's not how I game. That's not how I want to game.
No,
but I get where you're coming from.
I'm being a bit facetious, but what I want is some give and take, right? I want participation, but by the same token, I guess for me, my damage as a DM or as a game master is that because I have done the lion's share of the effort in producing the game, I feel like that I deserve a little bit more buy-in and compliance. Maybe those aren't the right word. Maybe compliance is not the right word.
No, yeah, I know what you're trying to say, right? You want a little bit of I guess, respect, maybe. You want a little bit more agreement that, look, at least acknowledge that I've done this work and that I need to get something out of this too. It can't just be me chasing you down and saying, no, get back with the party.
Yeah, I'm very fragile. I'm a doughy middle-aged white guy. I'm very, very fragile, and I need my ego stroke to know that I'm a good boy and that we're all having a good time. And showing up on time or early for years on end without complaint is, I guess, not enough. I am a sick person. So, do you rerun games? And what I mean by that is that if you're producing a game for a con, do you run that game again and again and again to refine that game? Been talking with
no.
See, so that's the thing that I hate about gaming is that you get one shot. And so if I screw it up, I shit the bed, I have some internal continuity error, some inconsistency, I don't get to go back. So my dream is to start producing con games that I just do at every con I go to and just keep like a comedian, right? Keep refining that bit, keep refining that set. That's a fantasy of mine. It's a journey that I sort of, that's in my spank bank, if you will. I don't know if you said you've never done that?
No, well, I have 2 responses to that. One is I have a couple of stories in my back pocket that if I'm desperate, I use. And my King for a Day book, I ran that 4 times before I sat down and wrote it out in book form. So it was a story that I'd always wanted to do. And every time I tried to start it, people would fuck up and we wouldn't get to the end of it. So on the fourth attempt, it got to the end and I said, okay, I think this is worthy of being published. And that was my first Kickstarter, by the way. But I think for me, you're talking about refining it and you want to make it better and you want to keep getting better at running that. But I think that there's nothing better than the pure first time you run something, because you're getting an organic reaction, both internally and externally, to the story you're telling. Even if you do fuck up, nobody knows, right? I'm going to go back to my art directing days and say, nobody knows what this character was supposed to look like. The players are seeing the final product, period. They're not there during the creation process. So if this person has a mustache and the writer didn't want them to have a mustache, who the fuck cares? The players don't know that. And so if you screw up and give somebody the wrong voice, or you have somebody angrier than they should have been, or you're trying to add some subtle notes, the players don't know that you took a misstep. They're along for whatever organic ride you're producing. And so, yeah, I don't want to do it again because I know, oh, now I'm going to compare this version to this version. Now I have a Cthulhu LARP that I ran 3 times. I have a Star Trek LARP that I've run 4 times. But those are exceptions to the 100+ conventions I've gone to.
So you're obviously very comfortable gaming with strangers.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with that, but whatever. It's not about me. I want to use the political parlance of the day. I want to circle back to 5e and 5e being a job.
Yeah.
And when I was listening to an interview that you had done previously, and you were talking about how D&D is a job for the DM, and it has gotten worse with each edition as time progressed. And I was wondering what made you say that, because I'm thinking about 3.5, because I said earlier I'm running it. It's a tremendous amount of work. Well, it's a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
And the asymmetry of 4e and 5e, where the game master isn't even provided the tools to get under the hood and tinker with the engine and basically trick out the encounter, or trick out the monster, if you will. I thought that just instinctively, I would assume that would have made the game easier and less work for the dungeon master, at least on the front end. So what about the asymmetrical system of 5e is still providing too much work for the DM?
I think one of the problems is just too many variations upon things. There's too many races, there's too many character classes, there's too many subclasses, there's too many feats, whatever the thing is, the backgrounds, the powers. Your character sheet is this spreadsheet in 5e of a stew of all these nomials, and they don't necessarily have to be thematically tied together. So you can be a half giant juggler and you take that combination because, it's going to give me a plus 30 to my stealth check. And so I now, as a game master, have to not only master my story, master the setting, run a good game, make sure everybody's involved. I have to know all of the rules, when you as a player only need to know the rules that you've mastered for your little game tree, for your player, for your character. And everybody is just mastered what they're doing. And they're only going to fight for their perspective when it's time to, what's actually going to happen here, because the rules don't cover this. So they're going to fight for their perspective and their thing, and they're going to want to win at their spreadsheet when you have 700,000 other spreadsheets in your mind or on your adventure or whatever that you're doing that you also have to have mastered. And so the newest editions have continued to put more and more and more power in the player's hands. Instead of giving them agency, it's given them power. So they have all this authority with none of the responsibility that comes with it, while the game master has all this responsibility and none of the authority that goes with it. So the game master has become the maid, right? He's become this expendable maid who can get in trouble for any mistake that they make, while the players can do whatever they want and there's no accountability. And the powers are on their side, the feats, the spells, the character classes. Everything is on their side, protecting them from the big, bad, mean GM, because for so long, bad GMs have been such a predominant part of the hobby. And rather than make game masters better, the books have now been designed to make the players, to protect the players from the potential of that, whether or not the game master's bad at their job or not.
I think that you touched on it there. Where's the money in making game masters better?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've been working on a book for a while in the background about how to be a better game master, but I'm not addressing it just to Dungeons and Dragons. I'm addressing it to everything. And it tells you, these are all the hats you are wearing when you're a game master. And there's a lot of them. And if you have people with social anxiety, you're now their therapist on top of everything else. If you have people that don't talk very loudly or don't want to talk in character and they do everything third person, you've now got to draw that out. If you've got a player that's just waiting for roll dice, you've got to find a way to engage them. And so the book is all about that, right? It's here are the hats you wear. You've got to make sure everybody's there on time. You've got to make sure that you're prepared. You've got to make sure that you know the chart. And the book, in each section, it gives advice on how to do this, not just better, but easier. How to take the stress off of doing this part of your job while you're the game master. What I've always thought, though, is we need more books that tell players how to be better players, but nobody would buy that.
No, it's true. Also, how do I delegate some of these responsibilities to the players? So, so Carol, it's your job to keep track of the schedule. That's your deal. So Carol's got the book.
And that's in the book.
Yeah. That's exactly the kind of thing that I need because all the other bookkeeping and malarkey gets in the way.
Yeah. You shouldn't, if you're spending 6 hours prepping the game, you shouldn't also have to call everybody and make sure they're going to show up on time. You shouldn't have to provide snacks. That should not be your job. And in the best case scenario, you shouldn't even have to be hosting, right? Somebody else should be having it at their house because you've done so much extra work and you're the one entertaining them at its most base level. So the more things that you can take off the GM's table or plate with that kind of advice, I hopefully the better the book will be.
I'm looking through your board game stuff. You've got a number of board games on Board Game Geek. I looked up your 2018, I'm going to say Senatus, but I had different people on the internet tell me different pronunciations of that word. I was like, God damn it, internet. You're supposed to tell me how to speak Latin. This is stupid. But it's pretty highly rated on Board Game Geek. It's an 8.2, which it doesn't have a great number of ratings, but still, that's really good feedback. Since it's your most recent one that I could find, assuming this is your most recent game, perfect. Can you give us the breakdown on it? Because I thought it was pretty cool, but I figured the game designer is going to give the better pitch than me.
My favorite game that I've ever made is called Dominari. You can find that on there if you're interested. I really love it because it's influence peddling, and it's the kind of game I've never seen anybody make, and it's risk without the fighting. And Senatus was supposed to be part of that series, and it wasn't published, it wasn't used. And so I took those mechanics that I'd written and I spent 6 years refining them. The game just got better and better and better and better. And now I would say it's probably the best of my board games. And when it was originally supposed to come out, it would have been light years ahead of other board game designs that were going on. Now I think it's just a board game, like everything else that's going on out there. But what makes it unique, one, there's just a ton of cards in it. But two, it's an area control game without it actually looking like area control. So you're trying to get influence in all these different factions on the board. You have the emperor himself, you have the Senate seats, you have these 6 different groups that are kind of equally weighted against one another, the peasants, the merchant class, the augurs, the scholars, and so on. I think what's the last one? I'm drawing a blank. There's the working class. There's the peasants, which are the plebes, and then there's the working class, I forget how to pronounce it in Latin now, scleratus or something. And and then finally there's the criminals, and they work a little differently. But you're trying to get influence with all of them. And when you get influence with them, you get to draw cards from their deck. And those cards do a ton of different things. And then you have these voting sessions to see how the bills and the writers affect the state of the game. You're developing corruption because you're these behind the scenes manipulators who are trying to basically spoil Rome. And Trajan is set 100 AD. So Trajan is the emperor at the time, and he's trying to do all these massive public works. So you want to be on his good side because he's appointed himself emperor, so he doesn't even have to agree with the laws that are passed. It is really, really involved and intricate. There are so many moving pieces, and it does a lot of the things that I like. It has negative feedback on the card. So, the Senate itself can act against the players, which I haven't seen in a lot of board games.
How does that work?
There's a deck of cards called the Will of the Senate, and from time to time you have to draw them. And the Senate does something to you or to everybody as a result of that card draw. I wouldn't say that it's unbalanced, but it's not designed to be symmetrical. It is designed to be one of those games where every turn the game state is changing and you have to react to what's happening on the board. You can't ignore things.
You had me in the description, at least that I read on Board Game Geek, with my two of my favorite words strung together: secret cabal. So I was like, wait a minute, we're the Roman shadow government. I'm like, fuck, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in. That's amazing. Yeah. That is absolutely. But yeah, that was really, just looking through the descriptions, that was the one that I gravitated to for three reasons. One, it was the newest. Two, it was the highest rated. And three, well, secret cabal.
Yeah, you actually draw hidden agenda cards at the beginning, and those give you some direction as to the kind of victory points you should be chasing after.
So sort of like I don't want to liken it to Lords of Waterdeep or other games where you get a hidden roll, but you're not deducing the hidden roll. You just have a hidden victory condition.
Right. If the augurs get to 15 points on their track, you get an additional 10 points at the end of the game, kind of thing. So, or if you can get the corruption total up to 50, you get this many points or whatever. And they cover all the different avenues. If you're the one with the most favor with the Emperor at the end of the game, you get this many points, so to speak. And so you're pushing for those things, but you're not necessarily guaranteed that you're going to get those points as part of your hidden agenda.
I want to transition into a newer project that you're working on, Jim. Can you tell us about Fairview?
Fairview, I kickstarted, I want to say last year. It's out. People have it. There's an expansion for it even. I don't normally do expansions for my role-playing games, but this one definitely deserved one. It's set in World War II in a small town called Fairview in the Midwest in America, and it's sort of become isolated. The war has been going on for a very long time. It's an alternate universe. The war has been going on for a very long time, and these people have become isolated from the world around them. And they're starting to, the PCs are starting to ask questions. It has a GM. It's a traditional role-playing game, but the way stats work is never been done before in this style. And so the characters are starting to ask questions of what the hell is going on exactly. I don't remember the last time I left town. I don't remember the last time we saw visitors. I don't remember the last time we did anything except make bullets for the war effort or make canned food for the war effort or whatever it is that the town does. And I cannot give away the secret. It is, without tooting my own horn, it is one of the best secrets role-playing games I've ever produced. And it was one of those epiphanies that I have where I said, fuck, I can't even believe I came up with that. This is way beyond my quality as a writer. And so it's getting 5 stars everywhere, and it keeps selling without me pushing it. And every time I do try to push it, the sales die. So I just need to stop talking about it on Facebook and just let it make sales. But it's one of those games where you just need to pick it up and read it, because if I talk about it, I'm going to ruin it.
The audience is, of course, going to want to know where they can find you. So first and foremost, where do we find Fairview?
Fairview is on DriveThruRPG. All of my stuff's on DriveThruRPG. I have about, I want to say 275 PDFs on there now. I've lost count, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Is it better to search Jim Pinto, spelled just like the bean, or is it better to search Post-World Games?
Post-World Games will get you to all the stuff that I've published in the last decade. Jim Pinto will get you other stuff that I've worked on back in the day, or things I've done for Alan Barr, things I've written recently. I wrote for Shadow of the Demon Lord. I did one of the expansions for that.
Holy shit, so that game is metal as fuck. It's so good. It's Mork Borg with crunch. Oh, it's so good.
I got to write the goddess of air and darkness. So it's that Brandigian country, which is sort of split. It's like Czechoslovakia, but with swamp. And so I got to write that that expansion for it, and that was pretty cool. It was very difficult writing for Rob because I didn't want to screw up any of the setting, right? I know he has a high standard, and I didn't want to add details that were going to violate something that had already been said somewhere. I can't read it all, and but I had a lot of fun writing that one.
And then you also have your own blog, right? That is also postworldgames.com?
Yes. And all one word, Postworld Games.
I will say this. I know that you're not too terribly active with your postings on there, but I would certainly make an argument if someone is a fan of World of Darkness and they just want to read a game designer's take on 5e and what they would do differently. It's definitely well worth the read. Any place else, any socials where people should look for you?
I'm on Facebook and Twitter. I post maybe once a week on Twitter, and Facebook, I try to just be light and funny, but every once in a while there'll be a post about game design.
Awesome. All right. Last question. Why do you hate capitalization?
It's a stupid thing. It made sense when I was 20. I don't know that it makes sense anymore, but I had just gotten it in my head that capitalized letters were made up bullshit, and they were just there for writers to feel big about themselves. And I just thought, I'm not going to capitalize my name. I don't need to. So at the time, I don't know if I was being pretentious. I was just being, I guess, angry. And so I just stopped capitalizing my name. And I don't do it now either, just to be consistent. But yeah, I think it's because the art is more important than I am. So it's more important that people look at the book and not worry about me. There's a sort of underlying self-image going on, I guess.
I think that is a respectable answer. Jim Pinto, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you being here. Ladies, gentlemen, folks, people, everyone listening, humans, this is a reminder that Why We Game is a product of the Influence Foundation. All rights are reserved. Editing is done by me, Barodor, and music by 99 Instrumentals. Please feel free to sell my shit, just don't steal.